Joining us now, Rami Khouri. He's the Director of Global Engagement at the American University of Beirut. He's the kind of big brain that I need to talk to on nights like this to help me make sense of this stuff. Professor, good to see you again. Thank you for being here. What do you make? You just heard my conversation with Congressman Chairman Schiff. What do you make of this? On one hand, we got the evidence that most of us knew about anyway. We didn't find any big news in this, but we understand the acknowledgement that Mohammed bin Salman was responsible for the death of Jamal Khashoggi, and tonight he faces nothing as a result.
He faced symbolic actions, the travel ban and things like that, and strong words, and we saw that in the Ukraine and Crimea. And in Syria, we saw these attacks against various targets that are said to be used by Iranian or pro-Iranian forces. The trouble with this policy or these actions is that they reflect about 3 decades of American policy in the Middle East and Ukraine recently, but policy that is based mostly on military strikes, sanctions, and tough words. And if you look at the last 3 decades, the terrorist forces, Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Shabab and others, have continued to expand around the world, that the people who've been sanctioned, the Iranians, the Russians, don't give a hoot. They haven't changed any of their policies, really. And people who've been attacked repeatedly, like Hamas, like groups in Syria and Iran, continue to operate. So there's something wrong with the basic methodology of American foreign policy that relies predominantly on strong words, military action, and sanctions, but doesn't address any of the underlying issues that gave rise to these problems and can help resolve them, with the exception of the Iranian nuclear agreement. So I think this is there's an inherent problem.
The Iranian nuclear deal took 10 years of effort and negotiation and 2 very solid years of American direct involvement in the whole thing. But that's the point, really, right? If you're looking at Israel's activities in the Middle East, if you're looking at Saudi Arabia's activities in the Middle East, and you're looking at Iran's activities in the Middle East, they have moved forward without the active engagement of the United States. So what does the re-engagement look like? Because everybody in the region needs to pull back a little bit and be more cooperative.
Well, we don't know what the re-engagement really is yet. It's very early days, and we'll have to give it some time. There's been some positive indications in terms of the U.S. sending signals that it wants to open the talks again with Iran, and some negative signals like focusing on military strikes and more sanctions. The problem in the Middle East now is that it's not the Middle East of 8 and 10 and 20 years ago that Biden remembers. The Russians are a major player in the region. The Turks have huge interactions all across the regions. The Iranians are much more widely dispersed. Public opinion in the Arab world is very different, very critical of the United States and Israel more than before. And 3/4 of the Arab people are poor and vulnerable and marginalized and powerless, and are rising up to overthrow their total government. So you need a much more sophisticated, realistic, and pragmatic American policy. And it has to start with the idea that the well-being of ordinary Arab people and the well-being of Israelis and Turks and Iranians and Americans must be the bottom common denominator that we all work for. That attempt has never been made to address the needs, equal needs of all these people. And by the way, if annexation in Ukraine is bad, it should also be bad in Palestine when the Israelis do it with American support. So there has to be more consistency and a little bit more focus on the well-being and rights of ordinary human beings, as long as those rights are equally applied across the board. And that's the American way, according to the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and many other real parts of American life, to treat people equally and decently.
Well, we haven't fully mastered that here, but we continue to try. Rami, good to see you as always. Thank you for being with us. Rami Khouri is the Director of Global Engagement at the American University of Beirut. Always appreciate your time, friend.